Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another week of the Big Boys Pod. Got a fun one coming at you this week. I'm Trevor alongside my co-host here, Coach Cole. Coach Cole, how you been?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well.
We had a pretty awesome week this past week. Some
We
good
did.
games. Some games I didn't think we were expecting. More so something I don't think we were expecting. Trevor, it only took us less than 2 months for the podcast to officially go global.
Oh, really?
That's right. We got listeners in Nepal. Okay?
Really?
Granted, it might be people I know, and they might be on vacation. But regardless, the Big Boys Pod has not only gone countrywide popular, but around the world. So
Jeez.
we're hitting the Western Hemisphere. We're hitting the Eastern Hemisphere. The Big Ten's huge. I got a couple cutouts from this week from a couple things I did. So we're feeling good. We're excited to get back into it.
Yeah.
I think, we're just going to the moon and glad to see we got people listening from around the world.
Would you say we're a worldwide media empire at this point? Or too early to tell?
I know we've talked about a lot of stuff off air. It might be a little too early to tell, but I just think things are going well. To be honest, I listen to a lot of the other like Big Ten podcasts that get put on like big media channels, things like not just YouTube, not just us doing this.
Yeah.
I think we're doing perfectly fine compared to some of the people who get posted, man. I mean, some of the corny stuff I see. So we're excited to get into it, excited to do our regular stuff. You want to get into Friday night's game?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, Oregon on the road at Purdue. That Spoilermaker matchup, they've been known to knock off some top 5 teams in West Lafayette. There's something with that Dick's Sporting Goods and like the aura surrounding that store really fuels the Boilermakers versus top 5 teams. They didn't get it done, though, on Friday. 35-0. Oregon took home the win. After being number 2, they're now number 1 this week in the country. Do you think they're deserving that ranking? How do you think, their performance was Friday night, if that justifies being number 1 in the country right now?
I mean, I think it justifies it, right? Like, Purdue did just take Illinois last week deep into a crazy overtime game.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon being 7-0 right now makes perfect sense. I think it's crazier that the Big Ten kind of is running the United States right now, and the parity in this league is crazy. I mean, the 1-loss teams and even some of the 2-loss teams can still knock off some of these teams. We'll talk more about some of these other teams, but more so, man, the Ducks are cooking, and I was really excited to watch that game. And they just started scoring and really never looked back.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The first thing I put down on my notes is Oregon just keeps rolling. I mean, 35-0. I saw it was their first road shutout in like 30 plus years or something like that. And doing
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and doing that in your first year in the Big Ten. First time traveling. Maybe they've gone there in the past, but first time as a conference matchup going on the road to West Lafayette there and taking care of business, like we've known them to do so far this year is pretty big for them. Looking at some of the players, like Dylan Gabriel was really big again. Had 2 touchdowns in the air. Jordan James had the first 2 opening drives from Oregon.
Yep.
Just pounding the rock and getting it in there. Just didn't really look back from there. And that defense too. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. 93 passing yards they held Purdue to. Now they're on their backup quarterback Hudson Cards and like concussion protocol right now. So maybe that's a little bit something to do with it. Getting your first guy off the bench. But still, I mean, big oof for Purdue. Just not looking like they're putting it together. And I mean, Oregon's D really just taking care of business there. So
Oregon's D taking care of business. Yeah, Oregon's offense also showing how deep they are. I mean, Noah Whittington getting that fourth quarter touchdown. They commented like in game. They said that was an outstanding touchdown catch by a running back. Man, that's just the dogs that they have out in Eugene.
Yeah.
Like that's just how it goes, right? And Lanning obviously has been winning the recruiting game, and now it's starting to show deep into the year. Them being 7-0. I don't know the last time Oregon's been this good. I was going to look it up. It really feels like since we've been like in middle school or something like that. It's been quite a while. I
mean, they were really good last year, but
Washington
just kind of was a step above them, unfortunately, for Oregon. But other than that, I mean, they've had some
And
good
it's still
teams.
wide open to see who takes over the rest of this year.
Yeah.
But, I mean, them being one makes perfect sense to me right now. I think it's well-earned, well-deserved, and I think it's theirs to lose, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, not to get too much into out of the conference, but that number one ranking, I think, is justified too. They have the best win of teams that are still undefeated. Maybe you could say Georgia's win over Texas is better, but Georgia's got that loss to Alabama. Alabama had the win over Georgia, but they have 2 losses now on the season. So yeah, I mean, 7-0, big top 5 win, looking the part right now. So that's it for me on this Friday night game. Nothing too surprising, I don't think. Do you have any other closing thoughts on this one?
No, yeah, last time they held the number 1 spot in the top AP was 2012. So
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, they went 10-0. I do think they could go 10-0 here. They honestly kind of went through their gauntlet of their calendar, their schedule, but it's the Big Ten. I already said the parity's crazy in this league. I think anything can happen. So
yeah,
that was good Friday night.
They got a tough matchup this weekend, which we'll talk about. They're favored for sure, but we'll get to that later. But you never know. Parity is deep in this conference. Yeah, totally. So kicking it into Saturday morning, that big noon kickoff game. I was excited to talk about this one. I mentioned this one, one of our first episodes early in the season. Kind of did some schedule watching at that point of where some of these teams might end up, and that is the Nebraska-Indiana game at Memorial Stadium in Bloomington. Huge win for Indiana. I picked them to win it last week, was standing by my boys. I didn't even think it was going to be this big of a win. 56-7, just absolutely throttling Indiana. They showed Coach Signetti in the third quarter. The score is 42-7, just sitting on the side, mean mugging, looked pissed, just there was a tweet I saw where it's like, this is what a national championship winning coach looks like. Like, nothing's ever good enough. Got to keep executing, that sort of thing. And they're off to a 7-0 start too. And, not quite as good of a win maybe as Oregon's over Ohio State. But, if you're putting a Big Ten pecking order together, you talk about that number 1 spot or that number 2 spot. Indiana's in that conversation right now, and they're looking really good. What did you think about this one?
2 things. I think you're kind of right on the money. I think Indiana should be still ranked higher. I think there's teams like Iowa State and some other teams that are the top 10 right now that are kind of inflated compared to these massive wins that Indiana keeps knocking off. That's just the reality of it right now. The fact they scored 56. I know Curtis Work got hurt with the thumb injury. That always sucks, right? But he'll be back real quick after that. It doesn't seem too crazy.
Yeah.
So I know that you were super excited for this, especially even weeks ago, right? You kind of looked ahead. And it kind of just shows really how Indiana hasn't taken their foot off the gas.
Yeah.
Kind of like you said, maybe a national championship is kind of in the back of their minds. Coach is shooting for the stars there. I was listening to a podcast earlier. I think that his name's Aidan Fisher, one of the defensive players for IU, was just talking about how everyone on the defensive side of the ball is a dog right now. And he's like, I don't know who the best player on the team is in terms of that, because everyone gets involved and makes plays so that the offense can go and do their thing. So
yeah,
he's a guy who followed Coach from James Madison.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I mean, he's a ride or die Signetti fan.
Yeah.
And he said the whole locker room is now, and Bloomington's just rocking.
Yeah.
This is the first time they've had the amount of sellouts in a row in years.
Yeah, it was rocking there, man. Yeah, that environment was really cool. Saturday there. It looked sold out on TV. The student section, they have a cool little thing. They have gymnastics pads almost taped to the front of the wall. So on kickoffs and when the defense is out there trying to get a stop, everybody's leaning over and slapping the pads. So it just
nice.
It looked really cool.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about that defense. Be able to stifle Dylan Raiola like that, had 3 interceptions. A lot of the hype around him was up till that point. It's a true freshman quarterback that looked, like a guy that's been playing competitive college football for 3-4 years and kind of wise beyond his years in the way that he plays the game, and they made him look like a true freshman quarterback on Saturday. We've shown a lot of love to that offense, but I think that defensive shout-out's well-deserved. But with the offense, I mean, Nebraska and their defense had not allowed a rushing touchdown all season and then gave up 5 to 4 different running backs. I've mentioned it in passing a few times that running back room is deep. You have Justice Ellison had over 100 yards, had 2 of the scores. Tyson Lawton had another score. Kalen Black, Elijah Green, everybody that touched the ball out of the backfield basically scored on Saturday. And then Curtis Rourke, 17 for 21, a touchdown, hurt his hand, played the rest of the series, then came out. But then when you have a guy like Taven Jackson, their backup, came in the game, went 7 for 8 with 2 touchdowns. I mean, it's like if you want to, if you want to rest Rourke for a week, just make sure he's 100%. Like you have a guy that looks like he can take care of business for you too. Yeah, obviously they want to have a guy like Curtis Rourke on the field, but if you want to be better safe than sorry, I think that's a route they can go down right now. So, I mean, they're firing all cylinders. I'm excited about this team. Kind of on the bandwagon this year. It's fun to see a team like this really put it together for the first time in 50 plus years now, it seems like.
First time since any of us have been alive in a long time. If you have any grandparents who remember a good Hoosiers team, let us know. We'd love to talk to them.
67. Honestly. I think that's the year.
But yeah, one thing I do want to say is I do think the Cornhuskers are leading the defensive stat in hurries on QB and as well as sacks, like 23 sacks so far in the season. So they do pressure their teams, but goes to show even more so how Taven Jackson can step in and handle pressure, and that Indiana's not just worried about right now, but they're looking deep into Indianapolis runs and bowl runs.
Yeah, if they end up in Indianapolis, it's like a home game for them. That place is going to be rocking.
It's going to be nuts, dude.
Yeah. All right, that's it for me on that one. You want to kick us off to the next one?
Yeah, you want to talk Wisconsin Northwestern?
Yeah, let's do it.
I do want to say, so this was kind of the one that we split last week, and I was super wrong. That's okay. Wisconsin did kind of do exactly what they were expected to do, which was just go to work, winning 23-3.
Yep.
Down at that field off the side of campus. Lock 1-for-1. But got it done with 160 yards. Tawi Walker, 123 yards. Not the craziest game in the world. Very much kind of some classic, slower Big Ten football, to be honest. But it was a Wisconsin win through and through. The 3-1 in the conference now. I mean, they could be a team that ends up being the top 4 team in this conference. End of the season. So good win for them. You've talked about them being a smash mouth team, and I think this kind of just goes to prove that more so with their short running touchdowns all over the game.
Yeah, for sure. They're just kind of rolling now. They've won 3 straight. Like you said, 3-1 in the Big Ten. Took that first game loss to USC, which as the season's gone, we'll talk about USC here in a little bit. As the season's gone on, that's kind of a tough loss for Wisconsin, based on the team USC's shaping up to be. But starting to roll 3 straight. In those 3 games, they've only allowed 16 points combined, while putting up well over 100 themselves. So, I mean, all phases of the game are clicking. Tawi Walker, like you mentioned, that was your big boy last week, and didn't get a score, but I mean, kind of offensive workload kind of ran through him on Saturday, and he delivered there. And that D was locked down. Only 209 yards allowed from Northwestern, and only 3 points. It just seems like everything's working out for them, and kind of good to get it going now. We'll talk about previews later on in the show. They have a big game coming up this weekend versus Penn State. So if you're a Wisconsin fan, you're hoping maybe some of these pieces are falling into place and maybe pull off an upset this weekend, or at least look a lot better than they did versus Alabama earlier this season. So I think it's a big win for them. Just keep it rolling.
It is a big win. They got big games coming up. Penn State. They got Wisconsin, Iowa game. Actually, we're going to be at. Looking forward to being there. And then they still have a Oregon after that,
Yep.
Wisconsin playing Nebraska, and then classic Minnesota, Wisconsin rivalry game to cap off their year. So still plenty can happen with this Wisconsin team.
Get that Paul Bunyan's axe. They'll be hungry for it.
Is there a better trophy? There, you know what? There are better trophies. We might have to do a tier list of trophies at the end of the year.
That's some off-season material right there, I think.
Totally.
We could have a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, that is a great trophy. You're right.
Last thing I want to mention about this one, just because we've been hyping it up all year, that was the last game actually at that Lakefront Stadium for Northwestern. So they play their next 2 home games at Wrigley, which Iowa played there last year when they played Northwestern.
A baseball field.
Yeah, and I guess it was a really cool environment. I mean, it's hard to squeeze a football stadium in there, the back of the end zone, and then
there's only certain ways you can really make it fit.
Yeah, but they'll play Ohio State there, and then they get one other game there in Wrigley, which that'll be kind of cool. But stadium served them well, I think. It was a cool environment, definitely unique for this season. So moving on from that, the big 2:30 game was Michigan going to Illinois, who had a fun 100th year anniversary of Red Grange with the throwback uniforms. Did you see these?
I did see these.
Yeah.
Did you like them? Everyone, the regular consensus has been people like them, and I know there's a lot of people who did a ton of work on them.
Yeah, I mean, the ones like this, like in the NFL, they do the ones like the Steelers. Do you remember like those Bumblebee uniforms they wore?
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the throwbacks that throw it too far back most of the time. So on paper, like I really didn't like these, but I don't know if you saw the work that went in, like the hand detail on the helmets, the guy that airbrushed them, like.
And that's why it's incredible.
Yeah,
like, it is really cool. I'm kind of right there with you. It might have been a little too far back, and with like the way that pads fit now and everything like that, it's just kind of like is doing too much. But regardless, the history behind that game. And the fact that they were able to do it like 100 years to the day and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to that.
Right? I saw somebody did like an edit of that, and I was going to talk about this play, but the fake punt on 4th down there that Illinois ran, somebody like turned into black and white, and they added like the grainy filter kind of over it, and they made the audio sound like old school radio style. And watching that play, like it literally looked. I was like. It feels like I'm watching a documentary from like, when they're talking about the early days of college. It's like some things never change. Like, when it looks, all HD and all the bright colors, you think it's a whole different game. And it's like, nah, this is Big Ten football the way it's meant to be played still in 2024. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, getting into the game, I mean, Illinois looking like a really good team. Played Penn State really close a few weeks ago. Ended up taking the loss there. But knock off a ranked Michigan team and just up their ranking a little bit this next week, 21-7. A good win for them. It was throwback football, not in just the jerseys, but the way their offense ran, only 267 yards. Yep, ILL. I came through.
Big Illinois win.
Yeah.
Big Illinois win.
And turnovers seem to be the difference in this one. They forced 2 fumbles on Michigan that Illinois jumped on and also picked off Jack Tuttle 1 time. Versus 0 from them. So took care of the ball. Forcing turnovers.
None helped the fact they were perfect. First time they beat Michigan since 2009. So there's kids who have grown up Illinois fans, and that's the first time they've seen that. So congrats to those middle schoolers out there. Always really cool to see that. You really don't know what you got till it's gone. But yeah, man, I mean, Pat Bryant kind of had a quiet day with 4 receptions, 32 yards, but still, I think he's like a great receiver, and I think that he's going to have some really good tests this week against Oregon. And I'm really looking forward to just kind of see how that whole game shakes out. More so, I think this points to Michigan and how much they kind of have fallen off, man. It's just, there's not much more to say. They're losing games left and right now. It seems like they're barely winning games they should win. I'm not really loving a whole lot of anything from them, so I don't know if you have anything more to say.
I mean, their defense is good for sure. But
and I'm not saying they can't compete, but it didn't look like they were able to compete against Illinois.
Yeah, no, for sure. Maybe a little bit of a talent mismatch and coaching mismatch there. I mean, Brett Bielema has kind of proved that he can be a really good Big Ten coach, and Sherrone Moore in his first year there. I mean, obviously coached them to some big wins last season when Harbaugh was suspended, but that was a completely different roster almost. I mean, the turnover that they had year over year it's almost like it's a brand new team, and seems like there's some growing pains there with his first year, especially in that QB room that we've talked about. I mean, my last thing on the game, when you turned it back over to me with that QB room, is Jack Tuttle does look kind of their best option now at QB. 20 for 32 on the day with 208 yards. Had an interception, but just being pretty efficient with your passing and getting over 200 yards is kind of better than some of the options between Davis Warren and Alex Orji that they had earlier in the year. So maybe that's something to build on now for the rest of the season, but probably not the year that we wanted to defend the national championship so far.
Yeah, definitely not what they were looking forward to. I think they're ready for hoops to start up in Michigan.
Yep. That's it for me on that one.
Yeah, same. Really same. One game I do want to get into is that UCLA Rutgers cross country trip. I mean, like we've talked about with the addition to all these teams, there's cross country trips over and over again, week after week. Rutgers actually is doing their part in the SoCal special, having UCLA this past week, and this week they're going to be going out to USC. Lost this one though when they hosted UCLA. UCLA beat them 35-32. That all kind of ran through quarterback Ethan Garbers, man. 4 touchdowns, 49-yard touchdown run. I mean, career high for him with 383 yards. On top of that, he won first win in 5 games for UCLA. So that had to feel good, especially going so far across the country. I bet the plane ride home was more than fun, right? So good for Ethan. And actually, he's going to be my big boy of the week.
Okay.
Because you just don't see stuff like that every week. The fact that he has been able to kind of bring UCLA back, especially against a team like Rutgers, a great team like Rutgers. We've given Rutgers plenty of respect over the year already. They could have won this game. They stayed in it really all the way till the end, but part of that is Ethan Garbers just never taking his foot off the gas. So good for him. Good for him for getting their first Big Ten win, and that's why he gets big boy of the week from me.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree with you on that. He is also my big boy of the week.
Let's go.
383 yards, 32 for 38. I mean, really took care of business. And they asked him after the game, like, did you see your stat line? That sort of thing. And he's like, I don't care about the stats. Just this first win feels good. Kind of get that monkey off their back. And for the offense, too, I mean, he led an offense to 35 points. That was a team that had not scored over 20 in their first 6 games. So that's got to feel good as well. Rutgers defense definitely struggled, and Greg Schiano talked about that in his postgame. They gave up 223 yards after catch. So that was supposed to be one of their bright spots this season, was their defense, and the secondary looks like Swiss cheese, just not being able to stop receivers. Is not going to get you to a lot of wins. And they also have a couple key injuries on that side. Defensive end Aaron Lewis is one of their team captains, and he's out for the year. So hopefully they don't limp along as much as it may seem. They're 4-3 right now. Still got a tough road ahead of them. It's one of the things that we talked about this off the air. When we talk about these teams, we could talk about every team. It's like they're good teams. I want them to all be bowl eligible, but there's only so many wins to go around. We're getting those last 2 might be tough for a team where they're positioned right now. On paper at the start of the year, I don't have any problems pegging them as an 8-4 type team, but looks like a tough road ahead of them from here. Especially if they can't get that defense to stop a team like UCLA that kind of struggled. So good for UCLA to take advantage of that. Ethan Garbers leading the way. And
I think Garbers leading the way. I mean, UCLA is a great team. They actually have a kid in the Chicagoland who is going there to be like a freshman QB next year. Okay. I've got a chance to see him play a little bit of Friday Night Lights action. And he can sling the ball, man. But it'll be good to have him right behind Garbers if Garbers can keep this up. I mean, I'd love to learn from a guy like him if he's able to put up numbers like that. And like you said better than me, he's just next game mentality moving forward. He doesn't care about that. He just cares about the wins. So good for UCLA. They're the team in SoCal kind of loving the Big Ten a little bit more than USC right now.
Yeah. You want to get into that one here?
Yeah, might as well.
Let's do it.
Kind of have to. Kind of another one that was literally across the country, right? USC going to College Park, Maryland. I follow a couple of the Maryland football players on Instagram, and the locker room after that game, man, was nuts. That's for sure. And that was really fun to see. They won 29-28. Miller Moss, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Trevor, I just have to ask, we've talked a lot about being a Miller Moss podcast. Where are we right now on this?
I don't know. This USC team, just another big collapse. I don't know. It's not Miller Moss's problem.
It's
not the offensive problem. It's a defense problem still. Has been the theme now for the first 3 years here under Lincoln Riley, that he can't coach a defense. Brought in a new defensive coordinator this offseason. They looked better in their first few games, and it just seems like the wheels have fallen apart. Maybe the talent's not there and the depth's not there to keep up now that you're kind of in the meat and potatoes of this season. Yeah,
sure.
I wanted to shout out Miller Moss a little bit too, and you took care of that because he played well.
Yeah. And it's not his fault, right? Like you said, and maybe I don't want to say we were like premature by any means. I just think it goes to show. We just talked about the other SoCal quarterback having literally a career day.
Mm-hmm.
It's going around. Let's talk about how good all the quarterbacks in this league are.
Yeah.
The fact that they go across the country, lose by 1 point. I'm glad you brought it up. I think it's time for Lincoln Riley to walk the plank. Honestly, after this season, if they can't get anything really figured out, it's 1-4 in conference. What does he have to show? He's not getting the big wins. He's losing at home to Penn State. If Penn State loses some of their last games, that's going to look even worse. So, I'm sorry, I'm not talking a whole lot about the Terps. I'm glad that the Terps got another win in the win column, honestly. Their first conference win.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lincoln Riley might be walking the plank, honestly.
Yeah, they're now in their last 15 games, they've only won 5 of them or something like that. They started off pretty strong last year and wrote a top 10 preseason ranking till about this point of the season last year and just fell apart from there. Won a couple of games earlier this year and fell apart. What was that?
No, a lot of that's just off of hype.
Yeah,
just being USC.
Yeah, last year was Caleb Williams coming back after that Heisman year, and kind of got squandered a little bit his return. And this year it was seeing Miller Moss in that Holiday Bowl win last year, and he's kind of delivered. But I think a lot of the excitement was around a new defensive coordinator. Maybe that'll fix some of the problems that we saw last season. And like I said, it's just not there right now. And buck stops with Coach Riley, and yeah, he's got a huge buyout, so I feel like he gets another year. Maybe they kind of look at this one as a transition year into a new conference and go from there. But
there's always numbers involved and stuff. Yeah, I get it.
But it's not looking good. So things are definitely struggling in Los Angeles.
I see some Trojans in the transfer portal, honestly.
Yeah. Fortunately, they have not the toughest game on paper this weekend. We'll talk about that. So maybe they can bounce back. Otherwise, it might be a long rest of the year. Maryland did win this game, so I do want to give them some of their flowers here a little bit.
Totally.
Quarterback Billy Edwards Jr. Had a very good day himself, over 300 passing yards, but quietly just putting up a really good year. We haven't really mentioned his name too much with this Maryland team. That defense has gotten a lot of love from us already this year. That he's kind of fallen by the wayside, but on the season, he's completing 70% of his passes. Just eclipsed the 2,000-yard mark this last weekend. 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And he's only a junior, so this is a guy you're hoping probably comes back next year. I think last week I just mentioned, you want to just build into next year after taking a tough loss like that, 37-10.
No, that is what you said.
And for him playing like that this past weekend and knowing he's coming back and then getting a big win like this, the locker room's hyped, like you said it was, fans rushing the field. Just built into that confidence. Still a lot to play for this year. and just take that and take it into next year and maybe get to where some of your bigger aspirations as a team are in 2025. So good win for them, and that first conference win is a huge one to get.
Definitely. Glad you brought up Billy over. Yeah, being over 2,000 yards in 7 games. That's pretty impressive. Not a lot of quarterbacks are doing stuff like that. Very quietly, too. Only goes to show the parity in this league, and the quarterbacks across this conference are maybe the best in the country, right? Especially after this past weekend. Tough week for Texas, but we're not here to talk about Texas. That's for sure. We got 1 game left. You ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it. The Saturday night game, the Iowa Hawkeyes went on the road to East Lansing.
Yes.
And
East Lansing, weren't you just there this
morning? I was there today, surveyed the damage.
Boots on the ground.
Surveyed the damage. Not a lot of damage there because people in East Lansing are in great spirits right now after that win.
Sure.
I was bringing the mood down being there. But,
okay.
Yeah, obviously a tough loss for Iowa. I talked a little bit before the show with a buddy of mine that I want to go scorched earth, but I'll rein in a little bit. But this is a hard one to swallow right now, especially after the way we saw Iowa play versus Washington 2 weeks ago. And I and a lot of other Hawkeye fans maybe thought they had turned a corner finally, put it all together, all 3 phases, all 4 quarters versus Washington, and just watch it fall apart as soon as that game started Saturday night. Defense looked really poor, gave up 468 yards across the game. And in the first half, they were outgained 250 to 58. So the offense problems were right back to where they've been the last few years. Couldn't really stop them. Didn't force a punt the entire game. The only non-scoring drive was an interception in the first quarter. Aidan Chiles is the only turnover on the day. He looked really good. I know you wanted to mention him a little bit, so I'll let you kind of cover how his day looked, but couldn't put a stop to him. And Jonathan Kim was kind of my silver medal for Big Boy of the Week, just for going 6 for 7 on field goals. Tied a Michigan State record, had a 55-yarder, and I know you love stats like this. He tied Iowa for points scored him himself. There was kind of a race going on.
Yeah, it's just with kicks.
Yeah, Jonathan Kim versus Iowa. They tied. So, I'm just kind of disappointed even having to talk about it right now because this one's kind of tough. Michigan State's a good team. We had talked about them quite a bit, that there's a lot for them to build on, but didn't think they'd get it done quite this year, where I picked Iowa last week, thought, Michigan State's not quite at the top of their mountain yet where they should be able to get this win, and they were outclassed on all 3 phases of the game on Saturday, and 32-20 final score. I don't know if I ever mentioned that. So Iowa falls to 4-3 on the year and 2-2 in conference play, and that lifts Michigan State now to 4-3 and 2-2 in conference play. Cole, you wanted to give some flowers out to the Michigan State team. I'll let you take care of that.
Sure. I mean, you kind of hit every aspect of the game, especially from the Iowa perspective. Aidan Chiles stepped up. I mean, the fact that he was able to help them get 27 first downs in the game. Iowa only had 12 first downs in the whole game. Yep. But, I mean, I think this is the best we've seen Aidan Chiles in a Michigan State uniform. Yeah. To be honest, you said that there was a little bit of a slough in that first part of the game, but kind of afterwards really never looked back. There are some really critical third downs and even a couple second down looks that Chiles just made some awesome plays. Really seems like he's starting to get more comfortable, which is awesome to see. Yeah. Just not always awesome to see against the Hawkeyes, but at the same time kind of goes to show that nothing in this conference is given for free. And honestly, like after seeing this, I think Michigan State playing Michigan will be a really fun game. And I think that could kind of go either way, especially if Aidan Chiles stays on top of stuff. So really, really proud of him. Would have probably give him a Big Boy of the Week if it wasn't for some of the other incredible play, especially from Garbers and the Bruins. I mean, career days are always hard to say no to. So good for them. Tough for Iowa. But both teams could have success this upcoming week, I think.
Yeah. with Aidan Chiles, I mean, I had mentioned, and the commentators talked about it quite a bit during the game, that he's just still so young. I didn't realize he turned 19 during the season this year in September.
Mm-hmm.
So just a really young guy, and Michigan State fans have kind of talked that he was just still kind of maybe a little immature in his decision making. And so to build on off of what you said, that interception happened in the first quarter, and I was a little hopeful as an Iowa fan of like, oh, this is what I've heard about. You know, he's going to make some poor decisions.
Yeah, we're going to be fine.
We'll be fine. We'll just kind of start digging into him a little bit. And for him to literally just turn that page immediately and just go right back to work. And he played even better than he did. He played better after the interception than he was before then. He was already playing really well. I think showed a lot of poise and maturity from a young guy, and hopefully build him into what he has the potential to be, which I think a year or two from now, we're talking about him being a front runner in the Big Ten for Big Boy of the Week in, week out, and Michigan State, maybe building that program back to where we know they can be. They're no slouch of a program by any means.
Totally. So. I mean, yeah, he is only as good as his ceiling is, and he, like you said, and like I said, only kind of started to progress as he settled into that game. So we'll look forward to seeing more of that. Kind of like to see how he moves in the pocket and moves out of the pocket. He did a really good job about that. So I'm sure Iowa's going to be kind of watching some of that film too, as they look ahead to see how they can kind of stop some guys who are a little bit more mobile and not just kind of stay in prey.
Yep. Yeah, so that wraps up our week 7 or 8 matchups. What week was that of the season? Week 8
that was
matchups?
Week 8, technically.
Yes. Yep. So let's take a look at the standings here. This is where I kind of want to spend a little bit more of a moment than we have the last couple weeks, just because and I think I said this last week, but especially now this week, another week of games under our belt, we're really starting to get a picture of where some of these tiers are in the Big Ten. And leading the way in the standings right now is Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State, all undefeated in conference play, all undefeated overall. That's the cream of the crop right now. You could throw Ohio State in that mix with their one conference loss to one of those undefeated teams. But that's your top 4. And then your next step down, Illinois and Wisconsin, both sitting at 3-1 in the conference. And I'd even throw it is really those two teams right now. That's maybe your top 6. And then you have this big chunk right below there of some 500 teams. That includes the Iowa Hawkeyes, Washington, Michigan Wolverines, Michigan State Spartans, Nebraska Cornhuskers, Minnesota Golden Gophers, all at 2-2, all have kind of beat up on each other. Hard to really discern who's better than who. Unfortunately, they don't all get to play each other. So we're kind of left with some of this patchwork of who sits where. At 1-3, you have Northwestern, Maryland, Rutgers. 1-4, USC and UCLA, and then Purdue at 0-4, still looking for that first conference win. But I think you're really starting to get some tiers here of where these teams fit in, and it'll help kind of shape who makes it to Indianapolis and who eventually makes it into the college football playoffs. So what's maybe your biggest surprise of who's where in the standings this year? Who's overperforming or who's underperforming where you thought they'd be sitting at the end of week 8?
Underperforming for sure is both teams who played in a national championship, obviously. Them just sitting kind of, like you said, in that 2-2 space is kind of crazy. Illinois is pushing up. Has been really awesome to see them. Biggest thing, when we're looking at points and points for, Indiana has scored 341 points, okay? The Ducks come in, I believe, third as I look at this. They come in third with 242, right? Mm-hmm. So Ohio State's got 261. So the Hoosiers are the real deal. The numbers show it. I know some people can say numbers lie, but I mean 341 points, 7-0, and number 13 in the country. I think they should be higher. I think they're a top 10 team. That's the biggest shocker.
Yeah. Yeah, and points against as well. They're third lowest in the conference, with just 96 on the season.
Less than 100.
Yeah, so outscoring opponents by 245 points on the year so far through 7 games is a very impressive mark. They've gotten a lot of flack for maybe a weak schedule to this point, but you can only play the games that are put in front of you, and the way you play those games matters too. And so maybe it's not the toughest opponents that a college football team's ever seen before, but they're going out in the field and 56-7 versus a team like Nebraska and doing that week in, week out. They passed the eye test, and I think that's my biggest surprise is just Indiana being as good as they are right now. It's really cool to see a team that's kind of been historically one of the bottom tier teams in the Big Ten really put it together for a year, and Coach Signetti hopefully is there for a long run, and we kind of see a dominant team out of Bloomington. I think a lot of fans there would love that. Are they a football school now?
Totally.
That's it for me on the standings. Let's take a look ahead at some of these Week 9 games. You want to kick us off with this Friday night matchup?
Friday night, yes, we had it. Actually, kind of mentioned it earlier. The second half of that SoCal is coming back up. We got the Rutgers USC action. Kind of a must-win game for both teams, to be honest. I think even more so a must-win game for Lincoln Riley after the stuff we talked about to host another team. They lost their last home game with that last-second pick from Penn State. But both these teams are very similar, to be honest, I feel like, in their point production and what they're capable of doing when they're both in the zone. So it'll go both ways. I think USC being under 14 is kind of whack. I think that's kind of a trap. I think Rutgers honestly pulls an upset here.
Really?
Yes,
even in a must-win?
I think. Say that?
Even in a must-win for Lincoln Riley?
It is a must-win for Lincoln Riley, but unfortunately Lincoln Riley's not out there, right?
Yeah.
And Miller Moss is awesome, but Kyle Monangai is a great running back. USC's defense has not been one of the best defenses I've seen in the conference. They're not horrible, but I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see how the chips fall. I think Rutgers is ready to go. They barely lost last week, so
yeah. See, I'm going to disagree with you there. I think USC takes care of business here. The 14 does seem like a bit of a trap, so I don't know if I'd take them on a full 14-point spread, but I like USC in this one, and for the defenses too. However, I think if you look at a quarterback like Ethan Garbers, who we gave him his flowers, had a great game for sure. I think Miller Moss beats him in a one-on-one or whatever you want to call it 9 times out of 10. Is just maybe an echelon above as a player.
Right.
And I think if Ethan Garbers was able to chop up that Rutgers defense, Miller Moss could have no problem doing the same, and maybe do it to even more extent. And maybe a high-scoring matchup in this one. Miller Moss, 4 or 5 touchdowns, something like that. So I like USC to take care of business in this one and maybe get their season back on track, get back to 500, just keep kind of digging the rest of the year.
Must-win game for really both these teams if they want to be bowl eligible, right? So both sitting at Rutgers at 4 wins, USC at 3 wins. I think it is a fair look to take USC. I think it's an awesome Friday night game, one of the better ones we've had in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to that. And Rutgers at plus 425 right now. I mean, that's kind of enticing. Looks kind of good.
You could juice your 7-leg parlay for the weekend.
Hey man, do what you gotta do. Do what you gotta do. There's no financial advice from this podcast.
All right.
That's Friday.
Yeah, Saturday. Yeah, Saturday morning, our big noon matchup. Nebraska going to Ohio Stadium, taking on the Buckeyes. Yeah, Nebraska. Is that your pick? You got the sticker?
No, more like N-O. No, it's not my pick.
Didn't get to talk a lot of Ohio State this week so far, just because they were off last week. So they're back and they're hosting Nebraska this week. We're going to go ahead with your thoughts. What do you think about this one?
Well, they both have 5 wins, right? And they both have had really a lot of success so far on the season. More so, Ohio State, their loss to Oregon. I mean, we've been pumping up Oregon as much as possible. The whole country has. Ohio State could have won that game. Flat out, could have happened 100 different ways. However, the chips fell. Really, just kind of the way it ended. If they play again, who knows? And they very well could play again. But I don't think Nebraska can handle Ohio State. I don't think any team is ready for an Ohio State coming off a loss to a team like that, who has the facilities they do and the recovery they do. I mean, that's like 14 days or 10 days, however you want to break it down, of damn near professional athletes getting ready to bust ass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Nebraska's coming in town for that, so it's not like they're traveling. They're gonna be feeling really good. And Howard should be primed to have a good day.
Yeah, I like Ohio State by a lot in this one. They're favored by 25.5.
Yes,
It's a huge line, so that's always a
it is a
trap.
big line.
But
It
I
is a
think,
big line, but it would have broke last week too for
yeah,
Nebraska.
yeah, and that's where this one kind of comes down to: do you think Ohio State's offense is better than Indiana's, or is Indiana really overperforming, or can Nebraska maybe put it together a little bit better? How much does game planning come into effect? All that sort of thing. But I think seeing how last week's showdown with Indiana went does not inspire a lot of hope for Nebraska, unfortunately for them. So I like Ohio State in this one. Like you said, they're well rested, had an extra week to prepare. Should be ready to go come Saturday at big noon.
Next game after that on Big Ten Network, we got Washington heading out to Bloomington to play the Hoosiers, who I still believe should be a top 10 team. I think after winning this one and becoming 8-0, they'll be a top 10 team.
Mm-hmm.
The matchup predictor has them at 84% of a win. Washington's a decent team. I mean, 2-2. We just talked about in the preview or kind of in the post standings how we're both kind of surprised where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not a bad team. Will Rogers is a great quarterback, but Curtis Rourke being out doesn't really stress me out at all, especially after watching that second half last week. That's no problem. He'll be back in due time. And even if he's not back, because I understand thumb surgery is pretty complicated, right? Robinson did more than enough, and that system's going to work. So I think they're going to keep climbing. I think they cover is at 6.5. That's just a touchdown. I do think that's easy.
Yeah, I like Indiana in this one to keep rolling. I like talk about these comps, and if Iowa can take down a team like Washington, was 40-18 was the final there. I don't see any reason why Indiana can't also do that. I think Indiana beats Iowa 10 times out of 10 this year, the way it's looking so far. So Indiana gets to host again, which I think the way that place was rocking last week, they're going to be excited again. Had another huge win. So, anybody that was like, I don't know if I'll buy tickets for this one, maybe they're real. If you missed out, now you're like, okay, I gotta get out to Bloomington, catch a game.
Totally.
So yeah, I like Indiana. Take care of business in this one and get to that 8-0 and should hopefully deservedly be in the top 10 with another Big Ten win under their belt.
I just saying, there's some teams, BYU. I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to get into it. We'll get into some other games. Do you want to talk Iowa game or want to talk that Oregon number 1 matchup? They're both good games.
Yeah, we'll go Illinois, Oregon, just because that's
okay.
the kind of the big marketable game on CBS there.
Totally. That's the game you got to tune in for if you got nothing else that you can really pull off.
Yeah. Illinois taking the trip out to Autzen for their first time.
Let's go.
Let's go Illini.
Would be crazy. Could you imagine? Unfortunately, I do just want to say really quick, after watching what happened last week, if we're doing some transition property, right, 0-35, Illinois only beat them by what? 1.50. So take 1 point away from that. That's still 0-30, whatever.
Something was in the water with that game a couple weeks ago.
Say that?
Something was in the water with that game. Purdue hadn't even scored anywhere close to that. And Illinois hasn't even scored anywhere close to that in any other game. I don't know what was going on, but
no, that was a fluke for sure. But yeah. I don't think this will be a fluke for Oregon. I think Dylan Gabriel, if he has 3-4 touchdowns, he might be a top 3 Heisman lock, if not already. I'm sure people are considering him a top 3 Heisman lock, but I mean, just another chance for him to kind of pad his stats. Oregon defense, good opportunity for them to continue to bolster their resume against a decent team. We've given a lot of flowers to Luke Altmaier and that receiving core, and I love watching the Illinois team play. They beat Michigan. Anything can happen.
They did.
So we'll see. But I do think Oregon wins. I think Oregon wins by 2 touchdowns. I don't think they cover the spread. But I will think it's be a high scoring game for sure.
Yeah, I like Oregon in this one as well. It's hard to root against them or pick against them right now the way they've played so far this year. Taking off Ohio State seems to be the best win of any team in college football, like I talked about earlier. So you got to think they're favored to keep it rolling into Indianapolis right now. Illinois is a good team for sure. I think if they hold it to a 2-touchdown game, that's what they held Penn State to. That's a lot to hang their hats on. And like you said, getting that Michigan win puts them at 2 losses. And they're maybe hoping for 10 wins to close out the year. And they're still a really good team. So it depends on how close they play them, but I do like Oregon in this one as well. So then on to Northwestern at Iowa on BTN. This is also at 2:30. Iowa's here by 14 in this one. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't have a lot of confidence. This so topsy-turvy how I've felt about this Iowa team this year and how I think a lot of people online have felt very reactionary to this Iowa team. On paper, I think they should get this win, especially at home, but 14 seems a little aggressive. I know they did it versus Washington, but we saw Northwestern light up the scoreboard versus Maryland a couple weeks ago, and then Maryland take down a USC team. And there's a lot of just infighting going on right now with some of these middle to lower tier Big Ten teams that maybe Northwestern can sneak one off of Iowa. They have been at an Achilles heel of Kirk Ferentz over his tenure at Iowa. Seem to beat Iowa more often than not, especially in a lot of big moments. So, I'll take Iowa just as the homer pick, but I will not be surprised if Northwestern walks away with the win from this one. I don't know if you feel any differently.
So I think kind of last week popped the balloon that I had for Northwestern. I think Iowa will have no issue, to be honest, covering the 14-point spread based on one thing. If they just get off the ground running, if Caleb Johnson gets 2 touchdowns, that opens up everything, I think, kind of for the rest of the team. Mm-hmm. When Northwestern loses, they kind of lose big. Washington, they lost 24-5. IU, they lost 41-24. Wisconsin last week, 23-3. Right, so they're getting blown out. So if Iowa gets cooking, that 14-point spread does not worry me at all. I think this is a Hawkeyes win and a good win. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to Caleb Johnson. Well, let's see Cade get some more touchdowns, man. I mean, he does not have that many touchdowns this year.
No.
Time to start adding some more to that stat line.
Yeah, you and Kirk Ferentz both said it in his press conference today. He said Cade's got to play better, something like that, just verbatim. Which first time we kind of heard Coach Ferentz say something like that in about one of his starting quarterbacks in a long time. So yeah, maybe.
Well, I appreciate the honesty from him.
Finally, yeah, that does feel good. So yeah, we'll see how this one shakes out. Guess we're both riding with Iowa, but I'm a little more apprehensive. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, totally.
We got one more 2:30 game here. We got a couple of the M teams facing off against each other. Maryland with their M has a little flag decoration beneath it. Minnesota, they just have the M. But Maryland goes up to Minneapolis to take on the Golden Gophers. These are 2 4-3 teams. Minnesota is a little bit better in conference at 2-2 versus Maryland's 1-3. And Minnesota is favored by 4 in this one. Obviously, Maryland very hyped up after that big win last weekend. Billy Edwards Jr., we gave him his flowers finally this past week. I actually do like Maryland to win in this one. The one thing that gives me a little pause is Minnesota's coming off a week of rest. Having that extra week to prepare seems to really help teams, especially this year with extra travel and all that going on. So, I'll take Maryland. Just seems like they're maybe ride the gravy train for another week. But similar to how I picked the last game, I would not be surprised at all if Minnesota makes their home fans go home very happy.
Sure. And I think this is kind of one of the games that'll be close again. I mean, after watching last week, Maryland is not dead yet, and they have no plans to stop anytime soon. I think it's who wakes up and who has more grit on the day, if it's Billy Edwards or if it's Brosmer. Both those guys are just juice trains, right, for their team. And so it depends who can get off sooner. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Edwards has almost 600 yards more and 5 touchdowns more. They both have 4 interceptions. But Brosmer's won games in big moments. He's had some really big plays to keep games extended, to win games. So we'll see. I think Maryland is kind of on a roll, and the fact that they just won is going to help them. I think this is a case, honestly, where Minnesota having a week off might kind of hurt them, just because it's been a team who's got juice back. So matchup predictor has most of America thinks the Gophers take this one, no problem, kind of 60-40. But it sounds like both of us are thinking the Terps.
Yeah, I like Maryland in this one.
Let's go Terps.
60-40 is a good level of my confidence, though. Put it that way.
That's fair, and that's totally fair, and that's kind of what I think too. Like it could go either way. Both teams are decent. I think decent is a good way to put it. Led by some really gritty quarterbacks.
Yep, right there with you. Got 2 more games here to cover. 2 late games. The Big Ten Saturday night matchup on NBC is Penn State going up to Camp Randall. And taking on the Badgers, who have been looking very hot the last few weeks, like we talked about earlier. Penn State coming off a week of rest, number 3 in the country now, 6-0. They're favored by 6.5 on the road in this one. I'll pick them, but they get off to some very cold starts in a lot of games. Look like a very different second half team than a first half team. If they don't come out of the gate storming, I think that crowd in Camp Randall will really be on Wisconsin's side, and maybe they can ride that in the second half and hold on to a close victory. So I'll pick Penn State. I mean, I'm not very confident in a lot of the picks this week. I think a lot of these games go either way, and this is one of those. Even though Penn State's number 3, I don't think that's going to let Wisconsin scare them by any means. So take Penn State, but I'll take Wisconsin to cover the 6.5 spread. Especially if that first half goes the way a lot of Penn State's other first halves have gone this season. Where do you stand on this one?
I think Wisconsin pops the bubble. I think they finally do it. Yeah, I think they get the win, and kids go crazy up in Camp Randall.
Yeah.
I know they've already had a couple big games up in Camp Randall, and I mean the Alabama loss was tough. Mm-hmm. Here's the deal, right? Drew Aller is a good quarterback. Wisconsin has a great offense, and I think their offense has just gotten more and more in tune over the past few weeks. I mean, I've given plenty of respect to Tolly Walker. If they can let him get comfortable, especially against that Penn State defense, right, and make it a long day for the Penn State defense, then that just opens up the entire offense for Wisconsin. So if that happens, Wisconsin wins. They're winning by probably a little bit if they do. Like, they're just barely edging out against Penn State. But I think it could happen. I think that kind of adds to the legitimacy of Oregon and more so the legitimacy of Indiana in the Big Ten.
Yeah. This Wisconsin team's looked really good. And like you mentioned, that offense looks good. They look like a completely different team than when they played Alabama in week 2.
Night and day.
Yeah, just really gotten a lot more comfortable as the year has gone on. I saw some Ohio State fans talking about Luke Fickell. He was longtime DC there, was interim head coach for a season, actually back in like the early 2010s. So they know the guy really well. And they said, when he was defensive coordinator, it took his defense like a lot of the year to kind of warm up and really play to their full potential. And maybe he's the same way as head coach. I don't know what his tenure at Cincinnati looked like in that regard. But, if that's true, Ohio State fans definitely know ball the way that team plays.
Totally.
Maybe they are just warming up, and it's 7 games into the year, and the best is still ahead of them right now. And just had to get that stinker of an Alabama game in their rear view a little bit. So, yeah, you got me second guessing my Penn State pick a little bit now, but it's good to be split on at least one, and so definitely be a fun one to watch.
I think you being hesitant's totally fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not putting all my eggs in the Wisconsin basket, but I can just kind of feel a big win. So the way some of these top 5 teams have been going down,
Yeah.
it's only right that it's time for another to fall.
Yep. All right. And with that one, we got one more to wrap up our Week 9 schedule. A little in-state
Another M
rivalry.
game.
Yeah, another M game.
M game.
Well, Michigan State, their letter, they do use the S. They do the S. Two M teams,
Sure.
Michigan and Michigan State, this time in Ann Arbor. Got relegated to the BTN at 6:30 on a Saturday night. This had me thinking, when's the last time neither one of these teams is ranked? Because, obviously Michigan had this dynasty the last 3-4 years here now, and even we're still good in Harbaugh's earlier years. And then before then, when Michigan kind of had some down years, that was at kind of the peak of Michigan State. Kirk Cousins days, D'Antonio kind of at his peak, being head ball coach there. Maybe you look back 15, 20 years to the last time this is an unranked matchup between both these teams. But here we are. They're both sitting at 4-3, both at 2-2 in conference. We did the standings update earlier. I kind of mentioned these are two teams. It's kind of hard to figure out who's better than the other, but they do get to play each other. And I like Michigan State in this one. Especially after that win last week. Seems like Aidan Chiles has turned a corner, get some more confidence, and Michigan just seems to be struggling quite a bit, and it seems to get kind of worse as the year's gone on. Their best win is USC, and that's not really an amazing win. The more we've gone into this season,
it's only gotten worse.
Yeah, so and Michigan State's wins are looking pretty good. I mean, beat Maryland early in the year, and two of their losses are to two of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten between Oregon and Ohio State. So I like Michigan State in this one. Probably been a few years since they've – actually, I take that back. They just beat Michigan in 2021, had that upset.
2021, yeah. Because they were ranked number 8.
Yep.
And that's like you said, it's usually been a pretty decent back and forth game. Last year it was 49-0. Michigan hammered Michigan State, but that was also when people started talking about some credibility issues with some scandals and some scouting and all that stuff. So that's a whole other story. Not really interested in that. I am interested in Aidan Chiles continuing his success after last week. Mm-hmm. If he can beat Iowa, I think he can beat a team like Michigan. No problem, especially after watching Michigan this past week. Here's my line. Kal-El Mullings, if he scores 3 touchdowns, scores 21 points, there's no way that Michigan State loses, if that makes sense. They just have been on fire in that sense. But we'll see. I think the keys are in Michigan State's defensive hands. If they can stop Kal-El Mullings and let Chiles get comfortable, so he can hit some nice looks and scramble when he has to, and stay confident.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think battle the trenches maybe for this one.
It's
in-state rivalry, so they're going to be playing tough. It's a kind of a little brother, big brother type rivalry too. So Michigan State's always eager to knock off Michigan, and they got a big confidence boost last week that can maybe ride that into a win this weekend.
Yeah, I mean Michigan leads the series 73 wins. To Michigan State's 35 wins and then 5 ties over the year. The ties are crazy. For the Paul Bunyan Trophy, no less. Not Paul Bunyan's axe, but the Paul Bunyan Trophy.
Yep.
Governor Trophy. So still trophy game. Will be exciting to see. Anything can happen. I think both of us want a little bit of Spartan action. And we might see a Spartan team who's playing some bowl game.
Yeah. They'll definitely be bowling at this point, so just matter how high they can climb.
Totally.
All right. With that, that'll wrap up another episode of the Big Boys Pod. Hope you guys enjoyed. As always, leave us some feedback in the comments. Any questions you want to send in, we can break down on the show. Other than that, it's a fun weekend ahead, and we'll be right back with another breakdown next week at this time.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to some good games. Friday night, it's got some great action, and then there's at least 2 or 3 games Saturday you're going to have to tune into. So Let us know on Instagram what you have to say. Make sure you're liking us on YouTube and subscribing. We appreciate all the fans. Whether you're in Nepal or you're in Indianapolis or Virginia Beach, wherever you may be, or Des Moines, we appreciate you.
Of course. We'll see you next week.
All righty. Peace out.
Peace.